Alright, welcome back guys to another What'd You Think movie review. I'm Alvan, and today we'll be talking about Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. So the movie is directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. They did Game Night, really good comedic directors, and it stars Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Hugh Grant, Justice Smith, Sophia Lillis, and Reggie John Page. And the movie follows Chris Pine's character, Ed, and he has to go on this quest to retrieve a very specific item, and he gathers all his friends and meets new people along the way to help him on his journey, basically, and help him free his daughter from Hugh Grant's clutches. And the first thing I will say is this movie was really fun. This movie exceeded my expectations. I didn't really have too many expectations going into it because I'm not a huge fan of I'm not too familiar with the lore and Dungeons & Dragons in general, but I will say the movie does really well in keeping the general audience informed while also appealing to the hardcore fans of the universe. There's certain segments in the movie where like they kind of drop a bunch of references that would go over people's heads, but I can totally see some of my friends geeking out at that part, and I think this movie does a really good job of balancing those specific aspects while also just being a really fun action adventure movie that happens to take place in the fantasy realm. I will say the biggest thing that I do enjoy about this movie is it is very earnest. So what I mean by that is the universe it takes place in is very outlandish, right? But unlike certain other franchise movies, they don't really make light of what is going on in the universe. Like, for instance, there's a specific scene where Michelle Rodriguez's character, she meets up with a halfling, but it's not really played, there's no comment about it, it's just the audience accepts it, and it kind of just moves on from there. And the situation itself is humorous, but there's no joke made at the expense of the movie, which I thought was really, really well done. And props to the writers for kind of making that happen, because you can easily just kind of go to the other side of it where you just make quips and jokes about how ridiculous living in a fantastical world is, where, you know, corpses can be brought back from the dead and there's cat people who are getting choked on a fish, right? So that's probably my favorite part of the movie, but also just the cast in general. Hugh Grant steals the show. He is so funny. He is effortlessly funny. He kind of just is this very nefarious character who is all in for the riches, and his motivation is just very silly, but also he kind of makes it work. And Chris Pine plays a really, really great Harper, and he is just very optimistic. I will say that I enjoyed that aspect about his character a lot. He's very optimistic. He's the planner in the group, and he does action really well. He does comedy really well. His dramatic acting is really good. So Chris Pine really fit into this universe amazingly, as well as the other characters in this movie. You know, Michelle Rodriguez plays a typical kind of femme fatale. She is Chris Pine's like right-hand woman, and she accompanies him everywhere. And Justice Smith plays a mage, and he is his character arc is really great because he starts off kind of doubting himself, but I love how by the end of the movie he gains the confidence of basically saving the team. The whole team ends up relying on Justice Smith's character, and I love that aspect of the movie. And Sophia Lillis, there's one scene with Sophia Lillis who plays a shapeshifter basically, and there's this one shot in the movie where it shows her going through a castle, and it kind of blew my mind how we're able to have this really, really amazing one-shot scene in a Dungeons & Dragons movie. Like the way that they incorporated it, it just blew my mind because I would never have expected it in a movie like this. And another part that I really thought was really, really good was the cinematography. Like it felt like a real movie. Like there's some sweeping landscapes where they're in the probably like England, UK or whatever, Ireland, I believe. And just so much green, so much forestry. Like you can see right there, it's I feel like it's mostly practical sets and on location shoots. It reminded me of Lord of the Rings and Narnia, with some humor mixed into it, and I think it really balances the humor well with the dramatic scenes and also just the adventure scenes. Because, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, I will say, you know, I don't really play it, but I also liked how I kind of expected this movie to be like to use more old language, if that makes sense. But I was very surprised at how it feels just like regular people in a universe, right? They're using modern day languages, which they're not really dumbing it down for the audience, which I appreciated. I thought that was really cool how, you know, Chris Pine says shit and son of a bitch and like all those different terms where it feels like, I know the premise of the game is just people creating these characters and committing to a campaign, and it kind of just feels like that. It's like a really well done, just one-off adventure. And I will say that an idea that I have to keep this franchise going is, if they do keep it going, I hope that instead of keeping the same characters for every movie, they kind of make this an anthology series where it follows a different group of kind of adventurers or whoever else trying to just go on a quest. Like, I feel like each movie should be a different quest instead of continuing one whole story. And I think that can really help its legs and keep the franchise going for a long time. Overall, I will say that this movie has just been a really fun time. It's a sleeper hit, I will say. I would highly recommend checking it out in theaters if you can. But also, you know, I would highly just recommend checking it out in general, just because it's a fun, irreverent action adventure fantasy movie. And so going into the score, I would give it a 4.5 out of 5. Yeah, I think there's so many funny jokes in the movie. Like, I watched it with Amir, Omid, and Owen, and we all just laughed throughout the movie. There's some really hard chuckles. And there's also some parts where Omid and Amir were just geeking out because they got a certain reference or whatever. But then Owen and I, we didn't necessarily get it, but we still enjoyed it. And I think another part is the score. The score feels so well. The score fits the world really well. It's like very, I don't know, it just fits the world. And another, you know, a final note is the practical effects and the creature design is amazing. The creature design, really, really cool seeing the translation from the game to live action. Really, really awesome to see that in the theater on the big screen. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the movie. Let me know what you guys thought. If you like this video, please leave it a like and subscribe down below. See you guys.